Welcome to The Bone, the podcast that goes deeper. Here we cut through the noise and get straight to the core of the issues that matter. From real stories to raw truths, we dive deep into the conversations that shape our world and challenge our thinking. We're not afraid to dig in and get to the marrow of it all. Whether it's life, culture, or business in sports medicine, we're here to break it down raw and real. No filters, no fluff, just to the bone. With your host, Shelby Daly, we're getting to the bone. This is a clinically pressed, approved CEU podcast. Find the quiz to gain credit at clinicallypressed.org/courses. Clinically Pressed Company, making the complicated simple through results that give back. Find out more at clinicallypressed.org. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Bone. Today we're joined by Dr. Eva Frank and Dr. Mike Hudson, two thought leaders who have been instrumental in exploring the role of specialty certifications in athletic training. They've published commentaries and research examining how specialization fits within our professional identity. We'll dive into what these certifications mean for the future of practice, how they intersect with education and scope, and what it might look like for athletic trainers to truly operate as specialists in their domains. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
So where in the world are you two?
Thank you.
And what all are you doing?
Well, you want me to go first? Okay. All right. So I am in Springfield, Missouri. I'm a faculty member at Missouri State University. So Springfield, Missouri is in the southwest corner of the state. I'm originally from Wisconsin, so some people will still hear that Wisconsin northern accent come out. But that's where I'm at right now. I'm faculty here.
Nice. And Eva?
I'm in central Pennsylvania. I'm the chair of the Department of Athletic Training at Lebanon Valley College, which is in central Pennsylvania, about 20 minutes from Hershey. And originally, I'm from Germany. I came to America when I was 13, and since then have lived and worked in Georgia, Florida, Illinois, Mississippi.
Very nice.
And now Pennsylvania.
So getting into the subject matter,
that's
for listeners who might not be as familiar with what the work you guys are doing, can you explain what constitutes a specialty certification in athletic training and how it differentiates from baseline credentialing?
Okay. I'll start because this is probably, I was the one who first started getting into this, at least for the two of us, for Dr. Frank and myself. I was the District 5 member on the NATA Executive Committee for Education, was the Education Council at one time. I'm not sure what name it is now, but I was chairing a task force. I was looking at internships, and we were getting done with that. And the chair of our committee, Russ Richardson, he reached out to me and he said, "I'd like for you to chair this other thing coming up." And I said, "Okay, what's that?" And it says the Board of Athletic Training Specialties. And I was like, "Great, what is that? What are we talking about?" Right? And so we had a conversation for a while, a good while, for helping me understand what was the NATA and athletic training trying to do. And I understand where people are, what is this? How does it fit in athletic training? Because we've always, I think, looked at athletic training as a specialty, as specialized practice. And as we continued the conversation and I started working on the project more and chairing and starting to work with the work group that was going through all this stuff, I got a better sense of what they were trying to do and what we're looking at. And for the most part, I think the way I usually try to explain it for somebody to understand what this is, specialty certification for athletic training, is to go to medicine, right, and say, we're very familiar with working with physicians And we understand that there's physicians that specialize in a certain area of the practice of medicine. So an orthopedic surgeon or trauma physician, pediatrics, something like that. And what they are learning is they learn medicine. They learn the practice of medicine, the general practice of medicine. Then after they've learned that and they become a licensed independent practitioner of the general practice, they go on to residency, and then they're going to learn a specialty through that residency. And that specialty, it's still within the confines, the scope of practice of medicine. But what it is learning a lot more education, more skills, more abilities within that area. So if it was an oncologist, right, if you are been diagnosed with cancer and you are going to be treated for that, you can go to any physician to be treated for it, but you're probably going to choose that physician who has that additional knowledge and skills and expertise and training in that area, because there's so much more that needs to be learned in that. And so with athletic training, that's basically the same thing we're talking about here, specialty certifications in athletic training, is that we have our 5 domains through the board of certification. You can look at 80 curricular standards, and they describe, they encapsulate the general practice of athletic training. And then as we start to practice and we gain more knowledge and we gain more skills and experiences, you want to be able to communicate to somebody else, or to identify to somebody else that I have this added education, skills, and abilities in this specialized or this specific area of athletic training. And the specialty certification is that formal recognition to everybody out there that you have gone through that education and training, you have been independently educated, or you have been independently evaluated and assessed, and now you are board certified in that specialized area of practice. Is that what we were looking for?
I think so.
'Cause I could go on for a while, but I'll try. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're going to dissect all of that.
And then Eva, how did you get linked up with
so
Michael on this whole project?
Yeah, so I was at Northern Illinois University, and I applied for the NATA Research Mentorship Program, and I got the honor of working with Bill Pitney, and I spoke with him about my interest in expertise development. How do we go from novice to expert? How does education fit into that? And he said, well, you should link up with Mike Hudson. And so I emailed Mike, and he was generous enough to entertain a conversation with me, and I asked him if he would serve as my mentor, and that's where it started. And then it was very evident that he got more and more involved with the specialty board, and pretty much we had to make the distinction of, I'm going to either continue on working on specialties and specialty certification with him, or touch base with him on occasion to just talk about my research. But it was a split road. So I said, I really am interested in specialties, because that is where that expertise comes in. We start as novices, and we, are advanced beginners. We become proficient and competent. We have some advanced skills, and then we become experts. So that's how we ended up starting working together.
It's been a while. We started out looking at clinical decision making. I think that was your original topic, and we were looking at some studies and then this stuff came to me, and I reached out to Eva and said, hey, I've got something. You want to try and work on this? And then it just kind of exploded from there.
Yeah. Well, before we get into your research, I guess, how is this supposed to fit into the current practice model, especially since most master's programs are designed around generalist competencies? Would this be something that somebody would want to get done right after graduation, or, a little bit later in their career?
Yep. So I'll start there. As I said before, I think a good way to try to start to understand this medicine. You go to you finish your undergraduate, you apply to med school, you go to med school, it's 4 years. And there's tests that occur, the U.S. medical licensing exam. They have more testing than we do. But basically, you get them the 4 years, and then that last year, if you're still going on, you will have a year that you start doing a residency. And in that year, you're learning that transition from student to licensed independent practitioner. And within that, you take the final one test, you pass it, you're now a licensed physician. And then you continue a residency that's giving you more of that education and training in that specialized area. That is what you plan to practice in the future. So for athletic training, we are different. And most of our peer physical therapy, occupational therapy are mostly like that, where we do our professional education at the graduate level. We take an exam of some type for that discipline, whatever it is. You pass that exam, and now you are a licensed independent practitioner. And the question then comes out, what next? Right? What do we do? For athletic training, historically, what we did at the undergraduate level is you started getting your graduate assistantship. You go that, and that would be that transition to practice process where you would learn how to go from student to practitioner through that 2 years, generally what it was. And then you start practice, you start going on with that. Well, when we transition to the graduate level, now it brought up that question is, what do we do now? How do we help that transition part? And I think, well, I wasn't involved in all the conversations occur at the NAT, but I guess I suspect that was part of it. That's what do we do now? And then there was this concept or this idea in athletic training for many years, many decades, about how do we recognize athletic trainers when they learn more, they get more advanced, they get more trained in their skills, and how do we recognize that? How do we identify that? And there was a group before Board of Athletic Training. There's many people that were involved before I got involved into it. And they started looking at residencies and the process of residencies. And I think they were comparing with medicine, pharmacy, I can't remember all the different disciplines, but looking at that and saying, this seems to fit for athletic training. We finish our professional education. We can do this residency training here, which is going to teach you more knowledge, more skills in that specialized area and expand that area that you're at and help with that transition, and then also give you the ability to take the test to then become board certified. So the residency process was in existence before we started to have the specialty certification, although those two things were trying to work together to be able to match that up. Professional education, residency, and then the specialty certification. But there are other documents, there's other ways out there, as you mentioned, graduate programs, master's programs and such. What can those do? Well, they still are teaching more knowledge, more skills. They're advancing that individual's abilities to practice as an athletic trainer. And every one of those programs can focus on whatever it is that they feel their faculty and their preceptors, everything are skilled at and develop that. The question that comes into play, and this is where specialty certifications and the board of certification and all their job, is there has to be some type of validation of that specialized practice to be able to say, this has been independently and separately validated as saying this is an area of practice within athletic training that is wanted and needed, and we're growing it and developing it. And this truly exists. These skills and things truly exist to practice in this area. And graduate programs could do that, but their focus is different. Master's program is, or a doctorate or a DAT, they're focused on the knowledge and skills and everything, but they're also focused on teaching somebody to be a researcher, DAT or the MAT, master's, to do that part, that academic degree, that master's, that doctorate, where residency is really focused on the knowledge and skills specific to that specialty practice. And really, it's intended to create a practitioner who specializes in that area.
Okay. And then before we get even deeper in, so between a continuing education unit for skills and the specialty certification, is it because CEUs are more of a competency base where a specialty or a specialty certification would be more of an encompassing chunk of information that you're learning and obtaining as you go on? How would you differentiate the two?
So differentiate a specialty certification from continuing education.
Yes,
correct?
since some people can get certified in different continuing education,
Okay.
micro credentials, I guess.
Okay. So, and then there's things that are certificates. Certificates, you can see the term when athletic training uses term certificates of advanced qualifications and such. One of our publications and presentations we've done has been about that part of what is the difference between a specialty certification and a certificate. And those definitions come from the credentialing world. So there's ICE, the Institute of Credentialing Excellence. And within ICE, I would say ICE is kind of analogous to the NATA in the credentialing world. And then within ICE, there is the NCCA. And I am not going to, National Certifying Credentialing Agency, something along, I can't remember the exact definition, but there you go. Thank you. Yes.
National Commission for Certifying Agencies.
That's just me. So their job is to oversee credentialing agencies and say, if you are going to credential on a very broad sense of all these different types of credentials out there, they're the body that's recognized to say, this is how it works. This is how the process. So the Board of Certification is accredited by the NCCA to be able to give our ATC credential. Okay. So from them, and this is initially when I was going back saying how I got into it and had to learn a lot, I had to dive into that and say, what is this world and everything there? And a big part of that part, CEUs and certificates, all that, is really understanding the difference between each one. So and this is a part that Dr. Frank worked on, was when we talked about that, and in our paper, kinesiotherapy, right, was the certificate that we brought up as an example and say, you can go and get your certificate in kinesiotherapy. You could do it dry needling, CPR, any of those things. That's a certificate. And the basic thing that's happening there is the body that's doing the education for that skill, whatever that skill is, they're also testing you to see, did you acquire the knowledge and skills that we taught in this thing? And they keep it all in house, right? And so it's their thing. And that's good things. They're very good skills, but it's all kept in house. And that falls under the line of a certificate, or an advanced or assessment-based certificate is what NCCA and ICE call that. And then there's what's called personnel or professional certifications, which the best example we can give you is our ATC credential. That's a professional personnel certification. So for that, you have the same thing. There's an education process that occurs for that, but it's separate from the credentialing. So that's why we have CADE, the Commission on Accreditation Athletic Training Education. Their job is to say, this is what has to happen in the education process. And we're going to evaluate programs and accredit them to say, here, I'll do that. And then to increase the level of patient safety and objectivity, to increase that level of patient safety, as the credentialing process becomes separate from that. And then the credentialing process has their steps they have to go through to earn that NCCA accreditation. And they'll be the same things. There's education that has to occur. You have to show how it's acquired, how you become eligible, and so on. But some of the differences is that you will have a separate body that evaluates will validate the existence of that body of knowledge. So it's not the body that's teaching it. It's a separate body that goes through the practice analysis to say that truly exists, right? So that starts that separation to objectively say this is here. And when they do that, and if they can validate that and they can say that it actually exists, now another part of that personal certification is you have to show how you're maintaining that. How are you maintaining the skills and abilities, that maintenance of competence, or maintenance of certification, which is really looking at maintenance of competence. How do you do all that? Now, your comment about CEUs, that fits into there, right? So we have to do our CEUs for our ATC credential to keep showing that we are continually maintaining and learning the knowledge and skills that go along with the practice analysis that defines what the ATC credential is. And so we can acquire that. And going back to certificates like kinesiotherapy or dry needling or CPR or whatever, the education that occurs in that should be things that fit in the practice analysis that defines our professional certification, our ATC certification. So we go and we show, here's what I did, here's the education, here's how it fits with that. So I'm maintaining my education and competence in that professional certification. So there are little facets that go into that whole thing to show that. But the personal and the professional certification is much bigger. There's more to that. And the other part of it, that external or independent evaluation of that, is what really provides the recognition or the acknowledgement to everybody else that this individual has acquired all of this knowledge and skills in all this area, and we can externally validate or externally say that that person is a specialist in this area. Anyone can really say they're a specialist. Then that's fine, right? You can say I specialize in this, whatever. That's perfectly fine. But it's you saying it, right? It's just me. And if you want to gain that higher level of recognition, so a lot of people look at it and say you have that. That's where the board certified specialty certification, which is that personnel or professional certification defined by the NCCA. That's where that comes into play.
And if I may add something, that's the sort of big misconception, right? Is that we as athletic trainers are already specialized. And we can say that, but we really aren't, because when we get our professional degree, we then have to sit for the board of certification exam. And that's our initial credential. That's the ATC. And then we, on an annual basis, have to get 50 CEUs. I'm sorry, biannual basis. 50 CEUs to maintain our ATC credential. And now we have, right, the KD overseeing the accreditation of the programs, but really athletic trainers through the BOC are deciding what we practically do, which is through our practice analysis. And that's exactly the same in the specialty space. Now you have people who work in a clinic who are really focusing on orthopedics. They came together and said, here are the skills that we have to know, the knowledge that we have to know. So they have their own practice analysis that then now the Board of Certification is building an exam out of for people who are eligible to sit for the specialty certification exam now can take. And once they take that certification exam, they get an added credential, which they then have to get CEUs for as well. Right. And that's, I think, where that big misconception is because people say, well, we already are specialized in ortho, but we really aren't, because 2 years in professional education, we're scratching the surface. And that's sort of the point of us telling the story, is to really differentiate between general practice, advanced practice,
that totally
and
makes sense,
specialty
because I think
practice.
people were trying to do that through continuing education certificates. Yeah. But everybody had a different mixture of those units, so there was no standardization of, well, do you really know that or not? And dry needling as an example, you know, I've talked to many people that have done different programs than what I did, and totally different on the expectations and standards and how many courses and hours and all that stuff. So it's kind of, it was very random on, okay, is it legitimate or not that you're practicing with needles?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And in our space, we're really looking at that to be advanced clinical practice, right? You're adding additional things. And that also comes with just simply experience, right? We're much better 20 years out than we
So
were
right
2
now we
years
have the
out.
orthopedic specialization. I saw something about
Yeah.
high school mental health specialization. What else is there right now floating around that are becoming specializations?
Formally, so excuse me, Dr. Frank and I here are really speaking about the research that we're doing, but probably just another part just to clarify for me. I am the chair of the Specialty Council for the Board of Certification.
Okay.
But really, we're talking about our research here. But to answer some of these questions, I'm going to use some of their information that's publicly accessible and such.
Yeah.
So your question about these other specialties that are out there. Right now, there's only one validated specialty practice, and that's orthopedics.
Okay.
And that one is validated for a few reasons. It started out where there were practitioners that were saying, I'm being employed as an athletic trainer, but I'm being put in these situations, physician's office, in hospitals, clinics, whatever, or it could even be in college, university settings, professional sports, whatever. But these people are saying, I'm learning so much more than what I did as a general practitioner, that professional education. And I want to continually learn more, and I want to share it with other individuals, and we want to talk. And they started to build their group that they had, right? And they got to the point and said, well, we have more here. How do we get that acknowledgement? How do we get that recognition that we truly have had more education and training in this area? Katie was then starting to say, well, let's start to accredit residency programs and say, well, what is the purpose of a residency? How do we recognize that education? How do we accredit and so on? That's Katie. That's their job, right? Mm-hmm. But then it came to the point of saying, well, how do we say that this thing truly exists? And that gets back to the whole credentialing world. And what's the key thing they use? They use a practice analysis. We used to call it a role delineation study years ago, but the practice analysis is a very specific process. That's not, the Specialty Council doesn't do that. There are trained statisticians and psychometricians and everything that's their professional training and stuff to do all that. But they're bought in to work with these practitioners, and through the process that they are educated and trained to do, they'll say, well, this is how we go about validating if this thing is out here or not. And it's bringing in people's conversations, focus groups, all that, build up a lot of information, then surveying a lot of practitioners, analyzing the data, some complex statistical analyses to get to the point and say, yeah, this thing seems to truly exist. Right? There's a need, there's a supply, there's body of knowledge, there's skills, there's these individuals that are educating and training everyone else to do all that, and it is based on athletic training, but it's more, right? It's more that's there. And so that is gone through the process, and it is formally validated. The other ones that you're talking about, now Katie has listed 8 different specialties, and it's a start, right? It's an idea to try and feed that process and say, we think these things are really out there, but we don't know. It's really for athletic training practitioners. The process really should truly be a grassroots process. We earn our ATC credential, we start practicing, we get bought into places, we learn more, we work with other individuals, we start to talk, we communicate, we develop conferences, education, ways to share our knowledge, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And finally we get to the point and say, yeah, this thing might truly be something more, something specialized in this area. How do we do that? Well, that's where the practice analysis and everything comes in and validates that and formally says this thing truly exists. Now, the other ones you were mentioning, what were they? Mental health, pediatrics, things like that.
I saw that they're doing some surveys, so that's why I was like,
and stuff.
Maybe.
Yeah. And right now they truly they could be out there, but they haven't been validated. They haven't gone through the formal process, and there's a lot of steps to be able to do that. And more than likely, it'll happen at some point, but there's a lot of things that have to occur. The orthopedics one happened because they jumped on that process first. And I don't know if they purposely tried to do it, but they did it, right? They started going through that. They communicated, they organized, they did everything correctly, and said, yeah, we can go through the process and validate that. Those other things could definitely be out there. It just hasn't had that information, or it hasn't gone all the way through that process. So again, somebody can say they can specialize in that area, and that's fine for them to say that. You just have to recognize that they're not board certified in that. They haven't gone through the formal credentialing process to say that yet. And even though they may truly have some advanced knowledge and skills in that area.
Gotcha.
And I think that's a really big point to bring across, is that people need to know what specialty is and how it evolves. So we have one right now, but unless we have people understanding the process and saying, these are skills that we do, and that's more than general education and advanced training, and you have grassroots efforts to go through that process, specialties aren't going to grow. So it takes a critical mass of individuals who graduate from residency programs to now sort of, if they did it in pediatrics, to come together. So I'm excited that you're seeing surveys. They got to come together to say, let's make this a credentialed specialty. And that's why I think it's really important for us to communicate what it is. Because if people just say, oh, I'm specialized in pediatrics, well, not really. There's this really external validated credential that you can earn, and that's going to elevate everybody who is an athletic trainer, which is exciting.
I'm going to open it up to you guys to navigate that conversation, because I've read the articles, but I want you guys to hit on the major points that you think are most interesting or most valuable to the athletic training community, and then I'll add some questions at the end.
Well, Eva, how do you think we should start, right? Because we can start chronologically and say we started doing this and it just kind of evolved that way, or there are ideas. Do you have a way you think we would want to jump into it? Should we do it? Okay.
I think we can briefly talk about maybe the chronological moving forward.
First,
so we'll talk about our article on the perceptions first.
That was our
so
first
it was athletic
one.
trainers.
That we got published. We got projects, but that first one they published. So Thank you. One, I think that
right.
We really started between Eva and I. We were starting talking about this, and my university, we teach graduate education, and we had a post-professional program, and we were working with our students a lot on research projects, and the faculty around here would try and immerse them into our projects. And this was getting around the time where I was starting to get, I bought into that BATS, Board of Athletic Training Specialties work group, that there's a whole process over there. So I started learning about this, and Eva and I had already been working together through that mentorship program. And so I reached out to my students and I said, what are you interested in? And some of them said, I'm interested in this idea of specialty certification. Specialty, what is that? So we sat together and we started talking about it. And it just kind of grew from there, of just saying, okay, we're going down this road, right? We didn't start it. It was the NATA, Katie, the BOC, the foundation. They were already started down this road. They're going that way. And I said, well, what do we know about it? What do athletic trainers know or not know? What do they think about it? Do they think it's important? Is it going to be useful to them? And those are just the questions that we were just brainstorming on. And so we decided, well, let's ask that question, right? Let's go down that road and just ask a very broad question. What do you know about it? And what do you think are the rewards for it? And what might be some of the barriers? Let's start getting an idea where we're at, and then use that to then start to step into more projects afterwards. And so that was the first one. We worked together, and the there are three parts. There was the knowledge, there's the perceptions, rewards, barriers, and then the demographics. But content-wise, there was the two, the knowledge, the rewards, and the barriers. And so the first one was knowledge. It's like, all right, let's ask, what do you know? All right, let's throw a couple questions that are out there, but designed it in a way to say, tell us if you know this or if you don't know. It wasn't so much like a test, although it was kind of that way as multiple choice questions. We're really just curious. Do you know this stuff? Do you understand what's there, or do you not know what's there? And basically we got out of there for 10 questions or something like that I think we had around there. 2 of them they knew, or at least more than half were able to answer it correctly and no. The other 8-ish or so, I forget the total number of questions, but around there, they didn't know. They're like, we don't know, or we got it wrong. And so that started to tell us, okay, we have a lot of education that we need to do, which is one of the reasons why we love that you reached out for us for this podcast, is because that's what we've been trying to do. And for years, we've been going to district meetings, state meetings, international. Sometimes we get accepted, sometimes we don't. But we're really out there just trying to share that, say, this is what it is. This is what the discipline is talking about. And then the other parts were the rewards and the barriers, and trying to see, okay, whether you know it or not, do you think this is worth it? Is this of value to you or not? And simply just asked ranking questions. Do you agree? Is it neutral? Disagree? Like that. And just try to have a variety of questions that were there and just try to score that. And we went through a process, a content validity index, using experts to help us validate this and try and see what do they think. And the other part, and this was, Eva really wanted to do this, and I'm like, well, this is going to be a challenge. How do we want to do this? And she was really curious about the legislative part, the practice acts that are really there. And I'll let her talk about that, because that was her thing to do that. I'm like, this is going to be big, but all right. You're right. She was right on the standpoint of we need to have an idea of what might be factoring into this, what might be mitigating this. And practice acts is like, okay, is this really having an effect or not? And so we had to figure out a way how to look at all 49, because we didn't do California, we didn't do DC. But the other 49 states, and say, okay, is your practice act restrictive or not restrictive? And I'll let her explain that one. But that was a fun one.
Yes, and I think the question really came from, which is something I and the students, we've wrapped our head around it. How does this impact our clinical practice when we have a specialty certification all of a sudden? How does it impact what we're allowed to do in our state? Well, it doesn't, because our state practice act does not change. So really what we were wanting to know is, well, which out of those 49 states had a restrictive state practice act, which would mean that they are saying you can only work with athletes that are participating in competitive organized sports, that go through a pre-participation physical exam. You can only work in colleges or high schools, versus less restrictive, where maybe the population that you are allowed to work with is physically active, right? That's a much, much broader umbrella term. And it, even as an athletic trainer, opens up the abilities that we're allowed to do based on our state practice act. So we were really curious to put them into categories. Are you restrictive? Are you not? Are we unable to decide? And
BOC,
we worked with the NATA, we worked states. With the legislative, the BOC. We worked with states to, him and I, looking at the definition of the State Practice Act of the actual state, but then we reached out to other people to make sure that, ultimately to the states, to say, do you agree with this? Would you say that you are a restrictive or non-restrictive state? Because ultimately, if you're a really restrictive state, well, then you're not going to be able to do as much. And then specialty certification, if you are not allowed to do X, Y, and Z, is going to be much, much more difficult. And I think that's a big takeaway, to say that your state practice act does not change. A specialty certified clinician still still works under that scope of practice, under that State Practice Act. So we took a look at that, and what did we find? More restrictive.
Really, everybody that we survey, and that part of our
know?
Sampling process, we had those 49 states, and we tried to go through and trying to find equal numbers of state or equal number of practitioners in states. After we went through this whole process of trying to figure out, are you more restrictive, less restrictive, or there were states where like, we don't know. So you're out of it. We just can't tell, right? Which way you are. And then trying to find equal number of states or equal number of practitioners in states that fit in the more or less restrictive. And then we did a cluster sample of those and just and studied them and see what they said. And for the most part, everybody came back and they agreed and generally agreed to say whether I was whether they were in a restrictive state or a more or less restricted state. So they had the ability to practice as we're educated and trained to do, where there's limitations that I can't really practice the way I was educated to do. And we're like, do you think this is of value to you? And they all agreed. Now, there were differences. There were some significant differences between that and the score, but they all agreed. They all agreed that there was a personal value to them. They all agreed that there was a professional value. It helped the profession, right? There was not necessarily me, but it helped the profession. And they all agreed that there were barriers. That specialty certifications, but there are going to be barriers. Right? There are these barriers that have to overcome. So they all agreed on that, but there were rankings that were there. They valued the intrinsic importance of it more. That was the top one. They saw the barriers and like, this is going to be a challenge. We get that. And then they agreed with it, but at the lowest level, they were least concerned about how it would help the profession. Right. And so we're like, okay, you don't know, at that point, we're like, you don't know much about it, but you definitely see that it could do something for you. So that spurred us on even more of like, okay, they want to know, they need to know about it, and they want something to be able to help them, whatever that might be. Right. And so that was a general summary of what we got out of that. But that part of looking at the restrictive part of states, I was really curious. Was that going to really, if I was really restricted already, am I going to care about this at all? And the athletic trainers in those states, they were still very interested in it. They still wanted to be able to pursue it, or they thought it could be of value to them. So we're like, all right, that's good. I mean, we thought from those findings that this is a good thing. Everybody was interested. But that Practice Act part, that's a key thing in this whole thing. And Eva was just touching on that, is that was part of some other stuff that led to some other work, is for us to really start the knowledge part and the Practice Act part are some key things in this to be able to figure out how it will fit in the whole discipline.
Yeah. And I think that's really where the hunger comes from for athletic trainers to want to do more, because we used to be at the bachelor level. And then a lot of us went to get a master's, right, to get just more experience and transition into practice. And now we have a professional program that's already at the master's. Well, just like Dr. Hudson said earlier, what's next? And so I love that we found that there's really intrinsic desire to want to do more. Just to stay in athletic training, because we all love our profession so much, and we really dug into that was intrinsic, which is important. Of course, there's perceived extrinsic reward, and then there's certain barriers, which led us into another research study that we did with our students at Missouri State, and that was perceived barriers of athletic trainers about obtaining the BOC specialty certification. And we did a qualitative study to really look at, well, what are barriers before you earn the specialty, right? Getting people to actually do it. And then what are barriers after? And we did a poster presentation on that. And hopefully we're going to write that. Well, not hopefully, we will write that into a manuscript. We're currently working on it, but it's sort of all tied together. And that led into our commentary to really say, I think the gap here is people are intrinsically motivated, but they just simply don't know where it fits. And that was sort of the point of our commentary, to differentiate between general practice, advanced practice, and specialty practice. that's, I think, our evolution there, and one really building on the other. And it was cool because we had students helping us with it. And so it was really also identifying, well, what would they be interested in? Because they are now the target population, right? They are going to move it forward. We're already deep in our profession. I'm not going back to get a specialty certification. But the curiosity of our students then really is how it evolved. And I think there was a call for the commentary, wasn't there? That Dr. Hudson was reached out to say, well, maybe there's value to just write a commentary and talk about really the three fundamental differences between general practice, advanced, and specialty, because we don't think of athletic training, professional education as general knowledge, general skills, general practice. Nobody refers to themselves as a general practitioner. We all refer to ourselves probably that we're more specialized than that.
Yeah.
That commentary.
That led
there
to
was
our
a
last
request for that
commentary then.
That was around COVID time, right? So that kind of threw things off a little bit, but we continued. We went through it and got to that part.
Yeah. So what surprised you most about how ATs viewed the specialty certification, either perceived benefits or the barriers?
I wasn't so surprised on the rewards per se. I was a little surprised that the practice acts didn't really influence it all. Everyone was still interested in it, so I was pleased with that. I was like, okay, that's good. That's a good thing. But the fact that they saw more the intrinsic value, that I wasn't too surprised at that. Because that's a very important thing. If I'm going to go down this road, am I going to do this? There has to be something that's really going to come back for me, because it's a big time investment. It's a money investment. There's a lot that I'm investing into it, so there should be something coming back to me. Right? So that part I wasn't surprised. I was interested to learn the barrier stuff. Now, in our survey, we created the barriers in the survey. We didn't have a qualitative part. We worked with those experts when we did our validation of the survey to help us with those questions. But then when we did the qualitative study with the students, the early it was transition to practice. Now it's early practitioners or early professionals. Thank you. And then there's a second.
Early professionals.
I forget their career. Yeah. I forget the name of them. But anyway, those individuals, and say, tell us, what do you think of the barriers? And it was interesting seeing the comments that were coming out of it, as Dr. Frank had mentioned, that they fit into two groups. They're like, there are these barriers before I'd ever take the exam. There's these things that I'm thinking about that are, should I do this? Should I not? What are these things that are there? And then there are these barriers say, okay, if I've got the credential, there's still these things that are going to occur after it. And how is that going to affect me? And that was really interesting, because really it gives us a whole lot of questions that are really out there. Saying, if we're going to go down this road, there's a lot of things that we really need to address and answer and such. Money is one of them. Third-party reimbursement, or just billing cash for your services. And so there's a big financial component to this, which me personally, I think that is a huge, huge part of this really expanding, is what's going to be the financial benefits that come to, and the financial costs, right? Cost benefit ratio. Is it going to be there? But the other part too was the concept of, is athletic training general practice or specialty practice? Because there were a lot of individuals that I met with as just going to different meetings that had very strong opinions about that. I was just saying, I don't think we are. I think we're already specialized. So why get another certification in something we're already specialized in? And for me, that was an interesting one, because, and even I had to, I think, go through that process to learn, well, what is the difference between a general practice, an advanced practice, and specialty practice? And there was some research that was coming out for some individuals, which was very helpful for our work. They were looking at advanced practice, and then we're just trying to, okay, we got to get a better sense of these three concepts and really what they are. Because if we're really going to go down this road, you can't specialize in something if you already think you specialize in something. Now, there are ways to, there's subspecialties, and that exists. If you go into medicine, you can say, I specialize in pediatrics and I subspecialty in sports medicine and pediatrics, right? Or oncology and pediatric oncology. And there's hundreds, 100 some, whatever those things are out there. Right? So you can do that, but basically you got to have a general practice first, because you can't specialize in something you already specialize in. And that was, I thought, an interesting one that was starting to come out from the students. And it kind of fit, as Dr. Frank had mentioned before, about people reaching out to us and saying, tell us more about this. What are you doing? What are you getting involved in? And like I said, it was before COVID, and we're doing some of these other projects and then thinking about what they asked for. And then as what we're learning, it took us a while to try and figure out that commentary, because a big part of that commentary, which I think is still a little bit controversial. I still have these conversations with individuals, and they're like, well, I already specialize. I'm an athletic trainer. I'm a specialist. And it's like, okay, that's fine. And that's not wrong, but it's wrong in the standpoint of you won't be able to create specialties and specialty certifications if you conceptualize athletic training as a specialty practice already. And that kind of got us farther into the commentary. And the commentary is basically in three parts. There's the education of what is personal and professional certification and assessment-based certificates, so you understand those differences. But there's a historical piece in there too. And we really wanted to make sure that that historical piece got in there, because the history of athletic training, looking at how it originally became a discipline, a professional discipline, because we grew out of, and I don't know how many people, we grew out of two disciplines. We grew out of physical education and physical therapy. And if we stayed in those disciplines, say we were all physical education, we were all trained to be physical education teachers, that would have been your general practice. And then you could have specialized in athletic training. So you could have been physical educator and specialized in that. But that's not what happened. We started with those disciplines and we grew into our own discipline. And then we started to define what that discipline was. They used to be the psychomotor, the behavioral, I forget the NATA document. I can see it kind of in my head, but the different names that were there of this, of the education stuff. And then the BOC started to do the role delineation study, and it just kind of evolved and say, this is what athletic training is. And when that happened and we got that external validation of that, then you could start to see this is the general practice of athletic training. And we are all being educated and trained and learning more. Our experiences, our job experiences, our continuing education, all that stuff is adding more, but it's adding more in a certain area. And athletic trainers are choosing that area that they want to expand their knowledge on. They want to learn more. They need to learn more for their practice. And that's the part where you can say, okay, now I can start to see, or we can start to define what is a specialty in athletic training. If you conceptualize athletic training from the beginning and saying it is a general practice, and it consists of these things, the 5 domains that come from the practice analysis.
Yeah. Well, and that's, a lot of the conversations right now is defining athletic training. And, we touch on emergency medicine, rehabilitation, therapeutic intervention, all these different things. But, are we really specialized in all of that, or is it the intermingling of all of it that makes us a specialist as an athletic trainer? And it's been quite an interesting conversation talking to everybody about that. And, you talked about physical education and physical therapy. I like that you put physical education, because I've been having conversations about performance coaching and all that. So I feel like those two kind of come together very nicely. So yeah, all the things in my head going crazy right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. And really what we took it, I love how you're thinking about like, what is athletic training, right? How do we define it? And it's really about how do we define general practice? And then does athletic training fit into that? And so that was part of our commentary. We actually found literature from Olson et al. And he indicated that there's 5 criteria that are necessary for the definition of general practice. And Mike and I looked at this and it sort of clicked because we were able to make all 5 of this criteria, right? Athletic training fits into all 5 of this criteria. So if I may, just very briefly, I'll share those 5 criteria and how that links to athletic training. So the first one is describe the core content and function of the discipline to identify the specific characteristics of the clinical work. And that really what defines our core content and function in athletic training is the BOC practice analysis and then the CADI professional standards. Specifically, what are we supposed to teach, the curricular standards. The second criteria is be supplementary to the description of the medical discipline and accept that overlaps exist between medical specialties. So we talk about every single specialty has a general practice. There is a foundation, okay? And we're linking this to medicine, that everybody goes through that medical education 4-year program. And that's the same with athletic training. We go now through a 2-year master's program. And then there's avenues in all the different areas that we can grow in. And a specialty is going to grow in that one isolated silo, but all of those specialties are going to overlap to a degree because they have the same foundational general practice, right? That same foundational education. So the third criteria for something to be considered general practice is it's got to be universal, independent of country-specific systems, settings, or working methods. And what we how we look at this is that athletic training is very different not very different, similar in the United States, in Canada, in Great Britain, in Ireland, right, in Jordan, wherever you wish, in China. But really what we linked to this is the World Federation of Athletic Training and Therapy, which started in 2000, and it was initially Canada and US, and it allowed Canadians to sit for the Board of Certification in the US, and it allowed US BOC certified ATs to sit for the Canadian certification exam. So 2 different countries, but there's some reciprocal I don't know the word. Acknowledgement. Thank you. Right. There's some something reciprocal that says that your education in your country has nuances, but it's similar. So now we can sit for each other's board of certification. And that actually has evolved in 2012 to include Ireland. And then also now in 2020, it was revised. And now the new iteration is the international arrangement, which includes Canada, Ireland, Great Britain, and the United States. And now we actually have an international consultant of Delaware that is an outside entity that now really oversees if somebody wants to challenge the Canadian athletic therapy exam, are they meeting, right, the core standards for that profession in the United States? And then how does that transfer over to Canada? So that's how that third criteria fits in, that it's independent of country, because all of us have academic programs, and in some countries, there's just a little bit more of an overlap. And I look forward to seeing that continue to grow internationally, which is really exciting. Then number 4 criteria is provide a framework for the content of teaching and training. And really what we're looking at here is the non-curricular standards in the CADI standards for professional education. And those are sort of every CADI accredited program has standards that they have to meet on how they deliver the content. Also, what are some administrative pieces that have to fall into place for us to teach and be a CADI accredited program? So those pieces of those professional standards is what really hits that framework of how is the education done, not the content, but how is the education done. Yeah. And we won't go into the standards, that's another podcast. But right, and then our last criteria is describe, in order for something to be general practice, describe where the evidence must be sought to develop the best science-based core function. And that's already established in athletic training through peer-reviewed journals, right? We have various options. Funding agencies, we have the foundation, as well as then national, regional, and international conferences that are occurring that are athletic training specific, athletic therapy specific, athletic rehabilitator specific, right? Whatever the country calls itself. But that's where we disseminate knowledge and really recognizing that we all have in the United States the same general practice that has evolved over time, but now we're adding things to make us be more advanced. If that makes sense. And so we really are the first to say, based on literature, based on somebody else doing already this work in medicine, we are now taking that work and applying it to athletic training. And so we really are truly linked in the evidence to say athletic training, how we know it in professional education, is general practice. And we need to really be intentional about saying what that is, that we are all general practitioner, but with post-professional education, with clinical experience, with the practice, the state practice and our credentialing, we become advanced, and then we ultimately become specialized when we actually sit and pass for that board certification specialty exam, which is created from an external validated entity. So yes, we're spreading the message that we are general practitioners, which I think from an education perspective is really important, that we keep people in our profession if they understand that we're just scratching the surface in those 2 years.
Well, and
there's so much more out there
talking about the generalist
afterwards.
And specialist portion of it, I know there's a lot of conversations around compensation and how to differentiate yourself competitively in the job market. So how do I get a better chance of being hired or considered for a position? I know that I did an undergrad in pre-athletic training, which doesn't really exist anymore, and then went and got my master's in athletic training, which I thought was going to help make me more competitive as a candidate because I had the higher education with the certification going into the job market. So now that we're all in a master's program, our entry-level program is the expectation going forward. Do you feel that these specialist certifications are going to help with making yourself more competitive as a candidate for hiring and for compensation, or have you guys not seen anything come through yet on those that type of data?
This is a very good question. And like I said before, I think financial, that was in one of our studies, how that part came out. And that is a very important part to this. The reason initially that why Board of Athletic Training, the BATS, Board of Athletic Training Specialties, moved over to the Board of Certification was to take advantage of their skills, their expertise in credentialing. Right? It started with the NATA, and then the NATA BSA realized, well, you've really got the expertise over here. It really should be over here. Because, and to start that process is, you really want that external validation of it. When you tell somebody you're board certified in something, that means something. That means that's a very important thing in the healthcare world. To say I specialize in something, remember, anyone can say that, and they may very well be true and correct and excellent at what they do when they say they specialize it. But in the larger healthcare world, you're going to get somebody else say, well, what are you board certified in? Like, well, I'm not board certified. And that means something. So by going to the BOC, it opened up the door for the specialty certifications to get that NCCA accreditation, which orthopedics has recently gotten to happen in the last year or two, that they were accredited by the NCCA. So when we say you're board certified specialist in athletic training, the credential for those board certified athletic trainers, there's some power behind that. There's some legitimacy behind that because we have set it up to have that external validation that's there. And that was started to help with what you're saying. When somebody goes out there and they say, I'm board certified in this, and now can communicate to whoever in that healthcare system, whoever it is, say, oh, not only have you had the education and training for all the knowledge and skills and abilities that we're looking for in that person, you've also been externally validated, examined to earn that credential, and you're doing your continuing education to maintain that. So I don't have to, as say the employer, do a lot bigger, deeper dive into things and to really assess even more. Do you really have those things, or maybe even train you to do more? I know you already have that stuff coming in, right? Mm-hmm. And so we started it that way intentionally to get that external validation. Now, the challenge here is to get everybody in healthcare to really recognize that validation. So we were told, there was a gentleman from the NAT and we were working on this, and we met with people in pharmacy at a credentialing conference. And I wasn't part of this conversation. My colleague was met, and he came back and told me later. He says, hey, they were in pharmacy and they said, if you're going to do this, you're going to have patience, because it took us 30 years before this really took off in pharmacy. And they were already embedded in healthcare to be able to get that recognition, to be able to tell everybody in the healthcare system, oh, you're a board certified pharmacist in nuclear pharmacy and whatever ones that are there and stuff. It takes a while to educate people, to have them understand what that really means. Now, the compensation part would then come either with that or after that. I can't say exactly how that whole process will go, but they're going to be connected together, because what it's going to do is it's going to say, all right, you have this knowledge and skills. You're a licensed athletic trainer. You can practice. You can do this. You're board certified in this area. I need a healthcare provider who can do those things, that has that knowledge, has that skill to be able to address these things in my healthcare system. And there's nobody else out there that can really do this or do it to the way that I want but you. So now I can hire you and put you into that position and do all that stuff. And that's really a big reason just why athletic training, I think, I can't quote exact evidence, but just sort of years of doing this, but why athletic training left college sports, it grew out of college sports, left college sports and went into the healthcare system, is because those healthcare administrators and physicians, everyone said, boy, you're really good at what you do. You're skilled at things, and I need you over here to be able to help with my patients. So I'm going to hire you and bring you in here, right? And that's how we got into that world. And now we're gaining more knowledge, gaining more skills, and hopefully that information is coming out that, hey, these athletic trainers could even do this. And the part that validates that extra stuff is that board certified specialist in whatever. The challenge also with that is being compensated. You know, if there is a demand for it, there is a low supply, but if there's a bigger demand, we're trying to build that supply to be able to go there. But the other part, if you really want to be compensated for that, is you have to generate money. You have to have monetary worth. And I know one of your podcasts had a very long conversation about that. And I know that colleague, Jim, and there's a lot that I've learned from Jim about this whole thing. And he's very right about, in my opinion, he's very right about a lot of things that he says. You want to generate a greater salary. You want to generate greater demand for you. You're going to have monetary worth within the system that's there. So you can do that by a cash-based service. I have these skills, you can pay for it. But healthcare isn't, well, there's shifts that are occurring. I get that. But in general, right, healthcare is third-party reimbursement. So the other part of this is really third-party reimbursement. But that even goes farther down the road where we talked before about practice acts. What's the practice act? And our study before of, are you restrictive or you're not restrictive? If you have a restrictive practice act, specialty certifications doesn't matter. You're already hindered. You're already limited on what you can do as an athletic trainer. That's a problem. Doesn't matter about specialty certifications. That's a problem. That needs to be changed, right? If you don't have that, or even if you do have that, the next challenge you have to get is you have to educate your institutions, your hospital systems, your physicians, your physician administrators, your administrators, all them, to be able to understand what is the monetary value, what's the patient value, all this stuff that you bring in, not only as an athletic trainer, but also somebody who's board certified. And if you can generate monetary value, plus you're also doing really good care. And of course, the really good care part is there because we've already been bought into it. But they can do the monetary part as well. Then you will start to see changes that will start to occur. But that takes a lot of work to be able to get that. And to be honest, a lot of people, say, what's the NATA doing for me? To be honest, what are you doing for yourself? Because you're going to have to be your own advocate. You're going to have to be an advocate in your healthcare system, with your employers, with your state legislators. Because if you have a Restricted Practice Act, you need to work on changing that Practice Act to be more. If you had a more restricted Practice Act, you need to get it to become less restrictive. So you can do what you're educated and trained to do as an athletic trainer. And then you become board certified in something that system can generate monetary worth or value from you. Then things really start to change from that standpoint.
And I also think that having shifted to the master's level was a really big deal because we are no longer losing as many individuals to other professions. I'm going to do an undergrad in athletic training, but now I'm going to do PT for my master's and now the doctorate, right? So I think with moving to the master's, we've really allowed people to say, I'm going to stay in athletic training. I'm going to do athletic training. And then that is my career. And now we are providing professionals opportunities to go get advanced degrees like a DAT. They can participate in the residencies. And I think the more we really all understand that the first 2 years are general practice, and then are very honest with ourselves that with time and more courses and different credentials that we can become better at what we already do. But there's a fundamental big problem with people not understanding what athletic training does, what athletic trainers do, right? Oh, you tape ankles and you bring out water. Well, that is absolutely not what we do. And it's definitely not what a specialized board certified athletic trainer does. But sometimes us in the high school or in the collegiate level don't know what an athletic trainer does in a clinic, right? Why would I get orthopedic specialty certified if I can't, or a certification if I'm not in the OR anyway, right? So I think just really understanding that we have grassroots efforts, and that begins with me as an educator, teaching my students what it takes to change the Practice Act, what the Practice Act even is, taking them to our national advocacy days here in the state. We just had one. We went to hike to Harrisburg, and that's when then we can share the story of, well, I'm at the general practice right now, but here are my opportunities for advancement. And when I start bringing more to the table, I can already ask for more money. And the nice thing right now is students are looking for jobs. I mean, athletic trainers are getting signing bonuses to commit for 2 years. We tell them a certain minimum salary. Don't take a job underneath that. The other thing we talk about is, well, now look into a residency program. Is there an opportunity that they will pay for it? So it's monetary compensation for sure, but what else can be added to benefit the athletic trainer to grow? That'll sort of, right, if you put that into monetary value, then that's a win. Certainly that's a win. And third-party reimbursement, hopefully is in all of our futures. But that's a huge battle that
So
we
looking at
all
the
have to sort of be
future,
aware of and
from your
advocate for.
perspective, do you think this will be a trickle down into the master's programs of what we're getting specialized in? Or do you think it's going to be a downwards to upwards kind of leaning on each other to develop these programs?
So I'll start on that part. Right now, and again, I'm talking about BOC stuff, but it's public information that's out there. There's, for the orthopedic specialty, to become eligible to sit for the exam, there's 2 routes to be able to get there. One is going through a CADI accredited residency, and that's a key part. There's places out there that say, we have a residency. Okay, great. You have a residency. Are you CADI accredited? Well, no, we're not. Okay. You may still have a great program that's there, but you haven't gone through the formal CADI accreditation yet. And that's your choice if you want to do that or not. But if you do that in orthopedics, that will be a direct line in to be able to sit for the exam when you complete that program, right? But the other route is through on-the-job training and experience. And it's similar historically to us as athletic trainers. We had different routes to be able to sit for the certification exam. And it just, you have to have that because it takes time. You have to generate enough of these individuals that are out there that are getting employed in practice and defining the discipline and everything. So it takes a while, and there's going to be multiple ways to do that. And every healthcare, at least I'd say, that I'm aware of, healthcare disciplines has generally had that same history, right? It's going to get there. So for specialties, it's going to be that same way. So you could do a master's program, and the master's program, depending on how it's structured, the courses, the experiences, however they do their experiences and such, they may be doing everything that would go along the line of orthopedics, giving you education and experiences and everything to be able to start down that on-the-job training path. I think we call them option A and option B, something like that. But it's basically CADI accredited residency or on-the-job training, right? So it can go that way, and that's great. That's wonderful. You just have to make sure you complete everything that's in there, the hours of mentoring from somebody who is a specialist in that knowledge and skills. You've had the experiences. You can show the content, coursework, and all that stuff. When you get there and you got that, you can sit for the exam. And so you've shown that you've done all the education and training, which goes back to that personnel and professional certification process. You've shown all that. Now you take the exam, you pass the exam. It's there. In time, if we start to generate more of those specialists in an area, that on-the-job training will go away, just like it happened in athletic training, just like internships and the different ways to be able to become eligible to sit for the BOC exam. It goes away because you finally generated enough of those individuals out there that you can maintain the process through that one education route, which is what we want to get to, because that then gets you more consistency in the product, the educated professional that you put out there, that entry-level professional. You're going to have a greater level of consistency, right? And so we'll get there at some point. When it will happen, that's a market-driven thing, right? It's generating enough of these individuals that have that credential, that get employed at places that employers and hospital systems see the patient quality value and the monetary value that comes out of it, and they start to hire and do more, and these individuals start to move across the country, and they're creating more residency programs, and the residency programs can generate enough of the candidates to fill the need that's out there. It takes time for that thing to happen, and that time is going to have to occur with each one of these specialties that occur. So if the next one would be, rehabilitation or pediatrics or mental health, whatever it is, if the next one is going to go through that same process. And hopefully, though, as more of these happen and we see more of those out there, that process will go faster and faster and faster. But it's going to take time to be able to get that. And that, again, comes back really to athletic trainers being advocates for themselves and really stepping up and saying, this is what I can do for you. These are the skills and abilities I have. This is what I'm worth. And this is what I demand for me, for what you want. This is what I need to be able to do the things that you want, to be able to get that recognition and such.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes from both ways. The more the more board certified specialists that we have, the more visible it is, and students are going to be more eager to, like imagine we have a clinical rotation and they have to do primary care and they have to do ortho in a clinic. Well, it would be so cool if they actually worked with a specialist, right? A board certified orthopedic specialist here, in our small community. So that's just exposure. So I think that's how it can trickle down. Students can see that they want to work in that clinical space. They're going to pursue it. And then on the other side, it's just really being honest with our students of all the different settings, all of the different opportunities that they have to learn more themselves, that we have to share in our education space to really help them with their trajectory, because they're going to we need people to want to become specialists, sit for the board of certification, right? Or sit for that specialty certification and really hopefully be so eager to want to do it in rehab that maybe in 5 years when they have been in that space, they know exactly what they're working for. And then that group can come together and do the whole process of becoming a specialty. So I think it does go definitely both ways. And like Dr. Hudson said, it's advocating for athletic trainers in every day interactions is going to be the most important thing for all of us to grow and benefit.
We've been already kind of doing specialized or specialization, but it was more based on setting, not necessarily skills. So I think this helps legitimize us in these different settings with these different certifications.
Yeah, that idea of settings, that's been a challenge trying to figure out if you specialize in a setting. And no, you don't specialize in a setting. You specialize in what you do, the knowledge that you have, the skills and the abilities that you have. Now, a setting may align with that very well. So when you look at the orthopedic practice analysis, there's 3 domains: medical knowledge, procedural knowledge, and I forget what the last one was. But procedural knowledge in there, it gets into, there's preoperative, intraoperative, and postoperative knowledge and skills that's there. Well, yeah, that fits in a certain setting where they're practicing, but it's only this, it's only a small facet of the whole thing that's there. So you could still specialize in orthopedics, maybe not do that part in there, because the person who wants you for all those other things that you have the ability to do, and you bring value to that place. And so it's not setting based. It shouldn't be setting based. It has to be knowledge, skills, and ability based. And then those people who are wanting to hire those athletic trainers are the ones that are out there looking for and saying, you have the things that I need here. So come here. I want to employ you. I want to put you here to do those things, to care for my patients, provide the services that are needed.
Yeah, definitely. Well, any other tidbits that we want to talk about? Any other data points?
So one other part we've kind of tapped on this, and sometimes it gets misunderstood, is scope of practice. There will be individuals that say, well, if I do this, I can expand my scope of practice. And that's a knowledge thing to understand. It goes back to your State Practice Act. The scope of practice is a legal term, and it's defined by what your Practice Act states. So if your Practice Act is written out and says this is what you do and what you can do, that's your scope of practice. And so some individuals have said, well, I'm going to go to a residency and I'm going to get board certified so I can increase my scope of practice. Well, that legally, that doesn't happen. You have added more knowledge and skills and abilities that are there, but you haven't changed your scope of practice. The scope of practice is your State Practice Act. So when I said this before, it's important you understand that just getting this doesn't increase your scope of practice. It gives you more that you can do within the scope of practice you already have. And that's that general practitioner concept. You got to have that. So going forward and getting that, wherever you go to to practice, you really need to know your state practice act first. You got to understand what's there. And then if you're going to say, I want to go and earn my specialty certification and get that recognition, first make sure your scope of practice is not restrictive and you can do everything you can as an athletic trainer. There's your scope of practice. Now you're going to learn more that fits within that. And we give a little example in our commentary about that, about saying, here's the role, the practice analysis for athletic training. Here's this domain and interventions. Here's a task. Here's one in the practice analysis for orthopedics. And you can see how the practice analysis fits into that general practice, the ATC domain 3 intervention, how it fits in there. It's just more that's there, right? And it's that Dr. Frank went through those criteria of how we're going through and defining general practice. And the second one talks about overlap between. It's important to understand that once you have that general practice and we start to have specialties, they are going to overlap. There's basic thing. We all have to know musculoskeletal anatomy. We all have to have that. No matter what specialty you go, or you all have to have that, right? So there's always going to be overlap. And even in some specialties, you could see an overlap in the domains and tasks that are there. But it still can be special in the fact of the entire picture of what that thing is. And it should start to differentiate it from other things. And we should see those other things as that happens. So it's as individuals look at this and they want to go down this road and they want to see is it going to be of worth to them. First, really know your practice act, whatever state you're going to go in. Make sure you truly understand everything about what's going on there. Because then if you start saying, is this going to be worth it for me? If you have an open practice or a less restrictive, more favorable practice, then if you get your specialty certification, there's a much better chance that legally in your state, you can do those things. The next part is making sure that whoever is employing you, that they understand what skills and abilities you have. And those we haven't, Dr. Frank and I talk about, what are next projects. That's one thing that I have in my head is looking at some of those financial parts and going into greater depth in some of those places. Because I think to really grow this, that financial component will be a big part of this.
Yeah. Well, I think this was a really great conversation. I learned a lot. Made me think more about other aspects of athletic training and what we're doing. I definitely like the generalist portion of it because I think that's where the definition of athletic training is really struggling is, are we specialists or are we generalists? The jack of all trades, as everybody likes to say.
Yep. It's not bad being a jack of all trades, right? You can be of value to a place.
Yeah.
And then that's good. And having a lot of knowledge and skills, it's a good thing. But there's more for athletic training. There's a lot more that we can do. And to a certain point, you won't be able to be a jack of all trades if you truly start to specialize in an area, because you're going to end up having to spend more of your training, more of your practice, more of your education and everything to keep learning more and more in that area. And it will be harder to be a jack of all trades. And that's not a bad thing in this world if we want to go down the world of specialties and specialty certifications. It's a good thing because you will get more skilled. You will be more knowledgeable. You will be of more value, monetary, patient quality care, all that stuff, as you keep learning and expanding the things that you can do.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed it. And when you guys have more information, we definitely need to reconnect and talk more about this because this is a new avenue in athletic training that people need to be knowledgeable about and what their options are.
Yeah, and for everything that you're doing, Shelby, this thing is outstanding, your podcast. Love this thing that you have going on. So, yeah.
Well, many more to come.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
That's it for today's episode of To the Bone. I hope we've sparked some new thoughts, challenged your perspectives, or simply reminded you to dig a little deeper. Remember, life isn't just about what's on the surface. Sometimes you've got to cut deeper and get to the bone of what really matters. To the Bone podcast is a product of Daily LLC. It's hosted and produced by Shelby Daly, ATC, and Randy Daly. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present. For more on the show, visit www.tothebonepodcast.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Get involved in the conversation. You can find us at www.tothebonepodcast.com. Drop us topic suggestions or be a potential guest. We're all about connecting with you, our listeners. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep cutting deep.